Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. That time of week again, everybody's favorite segment, the power rankings. Guys, I hope you had an excellent Mother's Day. Me and my wife went out to a cafe. It's really our first time, her being 5 months along now, getting close to being a mother herself, so we went out to celebrate. But we came back, we watched the end of the games. Atlanta, New York Mets just getting kicked off for the Sunday nighter, and as usual, we are doing the power rankings now. 30 or so subs away from 1,000. So if you guys aren't there yet, please subscribe to the channel. We are going to be giving away a hat, your team, your choice, when we do hit 1,000 subscribers. So make sure you're around for that. Hit that bell, whatever. There's going to be a video when that time comes. Power rankings, always super exciting. We have the bottom row, teams that are pretty much struggling to stay alive. One of the worst teams in the MLB probably. Middling row starting to be the second bottom row, starting to be those teams that are really starting to come out of their own, and some other teams that are pretty much running out of chances to be in the playoff hunt. Middling rows, and then the top row. We'll get to all these fun things. We're starting at the bottom as per usual. New bottom row team. I have the Miami Marlins, guys. 0-3 against the Dodgers, 1-2 against Philly. Almost an 0 for 6 week if they didn't come out and somehow get 6 runs against Blake Wheeler today on Sunday. Managed to pick up 1 win, but while the other two teams are finding series wins, at least over the past 3 weeks, Colorado is going to be number 29, and they were in the bottom, and I had a little bit of a good feeling about them this week. 1-2 against San Fran at a homestand against San Fran. Managed to get 1, not super great, but then Texas comes to town, and they find a huge sweep. I talked about it almost always when I talk about Colorado. They're really a team of 2 different stories, at home and on the road. And if they're going to find some wins at home, I can't technically probably put them in the bottom because teams visiting, they're always going to have that little bit of advantage. So it's really hard for them to stick there. Marlins, on the other hand, have not been able to really find much wins. They're trading off some of their top players. It's going to be a long season for the Marlins. Next up, we got the Chicago White Sox. 1-2 against Tampa, so Tampa Bay got a little bit of revenge against them as they'd swept them a couple of weeks ago. And then they went 3-1 against a team that has been competing for top of the division in the Cleveland Guardians. So if we really looked at Chicago over maybe the past 3 weeks or so, it would be kind of a tale of 2 different teams. We had the team that was setting records for potentially being the worst in the MLB, at least in April. And then they've kind of started to pick up, maybe getting close to 500 over the past couple of weeks. So I wanted to move them up. They were stapled in the bottom for a little bit, but now I do think they are better if they went head-to-head against these 2 other teams. Next up, we have the St. Louis Cardinals. It's been a pretty disastrous season so far for the Cardinals. Nothing really seems to be going for them. Goldschmidt's really struggling, and when Matt Carpenter is really what's leading the news in terms of positivity for your team, I think there's a little bit of concern there. No offense to the Cardinals fans. Going 0-2 against the Mets early in the week, 1-3 against their division rival team that they've always competed hard against, Milwaukee Brewers. And for me, losing series after series and not really being super competitive in your own division, it's going to be a long season. Cardinals are definitely in the bottom row. Next up, we have the LA Angels, 2-1 against Pittsburgh, 1-3 against the Kansas City Royals. So Angels did start the week. They beat up on a struggling Pittsburgh team, and maybe the pitchers in that didn't line up. Angels are going to find wins. They are going to be a little bit competitive here and there. It's not like they're a team without talent. They do have it. The depth just doesn't seem to be there to be able to string a bunch of wins together. Taylor Ward, without Trout in the lineup, is he able to really keep it going? Angels, when I look at the grand scheme of things, I think they are one of the weaker teams. So now when we get to number 25, this is a new team into the bottom row, and I'll be honest, when the Giants and this Cincinnati Reds were battling, they had been 1-1 on the week already. I was trying to figure out which one of these 2 teams is going to go into the bottom row, and San Francisco comes out while at home in extra innings to get the rubber match. That is pretty much the difference there. Cincinnati, 0-3 against Arizona, and then 1-2 against these Giants. It's been a world of not getting it done for Cincinnati. They've had one of the longest losing streaks a couple of weeks ago in the MLB, and they just have all these other teams that are supposed to be worse than them, but much getting better, and teams that are better than them, continuing to be better than them. So I am starting to be concerned. This team seems to be the weakest in their division, but there are other teams we're going to talk about in a second. Number 23, we got the Oakland A's, 1-2 against Texas, 1-2 against Seattle. For me, a losing week, and they've had a little bit of momentum. They were floating around 500 for a little bit there, and we're kind of probably seeing an A's team that we're going to see most of the season. They're going to lose more games than they win. That's probably the case, but are they as bad as they were last year? Can they beat up on these teams that are below them on the rankings? I think they can, and I'm going to kind of keep them in this low 20s area for now. Next week is going to be pretty important. If they can kind of have a 500 week, we might see them be pretty solid in this spot. They're playing Kansas City. They're playing Houston, a team in their division that they have been ahead in the standings, but are they really better? I don't rank them better on the power rankings, but never know, this week could do it for them. Number 22. You got the Pittsburgh Pirates, 1-2 against the Angels, 1-2 against the Cubs, and should they really be 22? Arguably could be in this 25 spot. I think this is the one spot that is up for debate in terms of the power rankings bottom row. Pittsburgh has not had a winning record whatsoever for feels like a month. They've had some long losing streaks in there. They had a really hot start in April, but since then the wheels have kind of come off. I think overall, though, we saw Paul Skeens make his debut this weekend. Sure, they barely squeaked out a 10-9 win in that, and they blew a lead that they had with him on the mound. He doesn't get his first win. He doesn't really look amazing in his outing, but we do see why he is one of the best prospects in the MLB. Overall, I think with this addition and the lineup that Pittsburgh has, I do think they are a better club than these guys. Maybe they haven't put it together. It's a long season. I think overall, Pittsburgh deserves that spot, maybe higher, really. Next up, a team that I'm just disappointed in. 1-1 against Philly and 1-2 against Minnesota. 5-game week for the Jays, coming out of what was kind of a shaky homestand before that. And really, it could have been an 0-5 week. They got smashed in the first game against Philly and barely and came back and won the second game in a 2-game match. And then against Minnesota, they were down 7-1 on Saturday and managed to squeak out a 10-8 win. Their biggest comeback of the season, a comeback that I don't think we're going to see a lot of if the Jays find themselves in that situation. So it was very possible for them to be 0-5. They managed 2-3 on the week, but overall, a lot of concern here. We see a lot of these teams ahead of them getting better day in and day out. One of them beat them last week, and we got the Washington Nationals. They moved them up a little bit, 1-1 against Baltimore, another 5-game kind of week for them. 1-2 against Boston. If you're a big fan of this power rankings, you know that both those teams are in the top 2 rows pretty much for the past couple of weeks. So have a 2-3 week and a 5-game week, pretty good. And we know Washington has had a pretty stellar start, floating around 500. I do have a lot of concern with their pitching. Is their depth? Is they're going to be able to keep guys that have solid offenses down? Probably not, but at the same time, their offense has kept them in games and putting up a lot of runs themselves and find themselves to be a pretty competitive team thus far. Number 19, this is a team I'm really excited to see more of. And right now, I kind of see these guys battling for third in the division. That's kind of why I have them beside each other. The Mets started the week off 2-0 against the Cardinals, saying, okay, we're not as bad as these guys. But then they go and they play the top of their division, Atlanta Braves, and they're down 0-2, playing the third game tonight. Don't know if they really have what it takes to compete, be a playoff team, so that's kind of why they're in this row here. Next up, 18, and Detroit's kind of been slowly sliding down the board. They went 1-2 against Houston over the weekend, 1-2 against Cleveland. A team that, while hot over the first 6 weeks, a team that I thought they should be pretty competitive with. Sure, they got one win. Sure, the series could have went either way, but right now they're falling behind. This is a stacked division if you're not looking at the White Sox, so Detroit just doesn't seem to have the depth consistency that some of these other teams have demonstrated in their division, and losing series is not the way to move your way up the board. Number 17, we've got the Arizona Diamondbacks. And speaking of losing series, they do lose over the weekend 2-1 against Baltimore, but they went to extra innings yesterday. Very much close to a tie if you really look at it. So on the road in Baltimore, they get it done at 1-2. They got to be pretty excited about that because they started the week off with a 3-0 sweep against Cincinnati. You'd think Cincinnati, a team that was vying for playoff contention this year, and they're definitely want to be in the playoff race, but they're falling behind as well. A lot of thick middling ground teams here. Number 16, moving on up a couple of boards, I think they might be the highest rising team, and we have to take a look back at their past 3 weeks. We know they started off atrocious. We know they started up dealing with a lot of injuries. They have been picking up series wins here and there, like the one against Detroit this weekend. We did see them go earlier in the week 1 and 2 against the New York Yankees, which makes them 1 and 6 on the season against the Yankees. A lot of concern there. The starting pitching was off to a really slow start. We're starting to see Valdez coming back off that little bit of injury. He picked up a win in this Detroit series. They do lose the one game to Skubal, who has been Detroit's ace. So maybe without that kind of backing Detroit, they could have had a nice series sweep. But they have a lot of ground to make up. And the one thing working in their favor right now is the AL West. Nobody has started blowing teams away. It's really thick and tight in there. And Houston is they're still fighting their way. I do believe them to be one of the better teams in the mix. Number 15, we got the Tampa Bay Rays. They had an interesting kind of week here. 2-1 against the White Sox, 1-2 against the Yankees. So overall 500, but we did see them go on a nice 5-game winning streak there. If you were following the City Connect jerseys when they debuted it, they won. They had been struggling, and then they kept winning, and so they kept wearing those jerseys, and so far it's boosted them up, in my opinion, up to 15th. Tampa Bay, just one of those teams that have been consistently sticking around. They're never an easy out on the schedule. And I think that goes to show right now, just right there, smack dab in the middle of the MLB. They don't have anything that really pushing them out and should be higher. At the same time, I don't think you can count this team out. They're at least competitive day in and day out. Number 14, we have the Texas Rangers. 2-1 against Oakland, 0-3 against Colorado. And this was kind of the fall of Texas this week. We see them have a losing record against teams that are in the bottom of the station here, and teams that you would expect them to have a nice week against. The one thing that's really hurting Texas, and it's without a doubt, is their starting rotation just continues to suffer injuries. If you look at their injured list, you got Scherzer. Now you have Evaldi, who's been on there with a groin injury. You got Dunning. You could look up and down, and they probably have a starting 5 that is better than any of their starters right now on the IL. So that is hurting Texas immensely. The one thing going for them, their offense, Semien, Seager, these guys continue to be solid at the top. They're picking up wins. And I think for them, as long as they can stay competitive while they're getting back in it, while their guys are getting healthy, they're going to be right there in the thick of it at the end. However, if it doesn't work out, wouldn't be surprised to start to see them slowly continue to slide. Next up, the San Diego Padres, 2-1 against the Cubs, 2-1 against the Dodgers. We're going to get to it, but last week, both those teams that they beat this week were in the top row, and they moved up a couple of spots. I didn't want to get too much behind them, and they were only both 2-1 series wins. Arraez makes a big impact on his Friday debut against the Dodgers, which is going to be huge. They've managed to fight the Dodgers pretty well so far this season. The one thing is, it's been 1 week, and I've been told that I kind of hold too much weight into San Diego. I'm not so sure. I do think they are stronger than the teams below them, but there's no consistency. They haven't really shown the power that we have seen in the past, and that's what we're going to want to see coming up into this next week. They have a 4-game series coming up this week against top teams like Atlanta Braves, and that is going to be a big part. Are they going to be able to compete in that series against Atlanta and move up? That'll be pretty cool. We'll see how that plays out. Number 12, we got Boston 0-2 against Atlanta. Just a 2-game set against them. I guess they got off a little bit easy, only having to play 2 games. And then they beat Washington, a team that's been pretty solid. And Boston continues to impress me. They managed to win series. They managed to stay in the playoff race. And right now, I kind of have them being that bubbling team in the American League as a playoff team. And I think 12 is justified. Number 11, we got the Cleveland Guardians 2-1 against Detroit, 1-3 against the White Sox. So while the White Sox have been impressive compared to the beginning over the past couple of weeks, Cleveland had to show me that they were there for serious. They deserve to be in the top 10. This week didn't do anything to convince me, and while other teams were doing a better job of convincing me that they were top 10 teams. So Cleveland goes down a little bit. They still are much higher than I would have anticipated. We're going to see, like this, I think this is a big rebound potential week for them to show that they really are a part of this race. They're playing Texas. They're playing their other division rival, Minnesota Twins, this week. And those both those games are going to be big in terms of overall race when we're talking playoffs. Next up, Seattle 1-3 against Minnesota. So a little bit of a battle. Two teams that were right beside each other in the power rankings last week. Been getting told that Seattle's been one of the hottest teams, sure, and they should have been higher, but I think they're right where they should be on the power rankings. I think this speaks well of how they are doing and how close it is still in their division, while the teams ahead of them, I think, are stronger. And we saw that when they played Minnesota this past week. They managed to rebound very well, beat Oakland, very good, and we'll see how Seattle keeps it going next. Next up, got the Milwaukee Brewers 1-2 against the Royals. 3-1 against St. Louis. So like so many teams in the past so far this year, the Brewers fell victim to the Royals and their all-star pitching. Their pitching has just been lethal, and the Brewers saw that firsthand. They didn't score too many runs in a couple of 2 one-run games that they lost. But I liked what I saw when they came back and won this weekend against St. Louis. 4 games against the team that's struggling the most in your division. You pick up 2 games on them, that's great. And they're showing that, yeah, they're still the team to be threatened with in that division. Number 8, I think this might be the highest ever we've seen this team. 2-1 against Milwaukee, 3-1 against the Angels. They just keep winning series against teams that are playoff contenders. And I don't have any reason anymore to keep this team down. They got young talent at the bats, and those guys are really delivering. And the pitching, I think, is probably tops in the MLB in so many categories, at least in ERA, definitely up there. And they are competitive no matter who they're playing against. I like to see it. And right now, this Central Division in the American League is getting heated. Number 7, moving up a bunch of spots. 3-1 against Seattle, 2-1 against Toronto. Minnesota continues their dominance of Toronto, continues their dominance of other teams around the league. And it's really been a tale of 2 cities, twin cities. It's kind of funny because they were down here. They had one of the worst starts in the MLB on the board. You could probably pair them up with Houston. Houston took them maybe a little bit, maybe not going to get out of it, but took longer to even start reversing course. But the Twins, they have completely reversed course, and the bats are starting to snatch, and their pitching has been overall solid all across the board. So the Twins are in there. Right now, I do think they're the favorite slightly over Kansas City in terms of the division. This is where it starts to get interesting. 6 is, we're talking about a sec, I'll just throw it up there. It's the Cubs. But I think the top 5 are pretty obvious. Like, I don't think anyone's going to debate too much that these teams shouldn't be in the top 5. But when we're looking at 6 through maybe 10, it's the same kind of category. You can maybe make arguments that any of these teams could be 6 and vice versa, but this is just how I've done it. And for the Cubs, they went 1-2 against San Diego. They did rebound a little bit over the weekend, going 2-1 against Pittsburgh, almost taking the sweep yesterday with Skeens. And for me, the main difference is Chicago has been pretty consistent compared to the Twins, compared to maybe Seattle and some of these other teams for the majority of the season. When you're number 6, you kind of need to give me that reason to knock off. So they've been number 6. I think this is their 3rd week in a row. So that's pretty much what is the difference at this point. I do still think they are slightly ahead. Number 5, we got the New York Yankees, 2-1 against Houston, 2-1 against Tampa. 2 series wins against 2 playoff teams over the past number of years. 2 guys that they've been rivals with for a number of years, just been battling these 2 teams constantly. I think the Yankees fans got to be hype. 6-1 against Houston Astros over the season. It's got to be pretty good. Sure, I still have the same concerns as always that there's just haven't had the all-around effort, all things going on the Yankees. It doesn't seem to be happening yet. But I do think top 5, they're clear. There's a clear divide here. Number 4, we got the Philadelphia Phillies. They started the week, they had a Monday game against San Fran, just finishing out the 4-game series, and they won that one. So they went 1-1 against the Jays, and then that was already talked about, and they probably could have went 2-0 there. And then 2-1 against Miami. They just managed to almost make a comeback after being down 6-0 against Miami today. Do still think they possibly could make the argument 1 through 4, any of these teams, really. And I have them number 4 because I still think Atlanta has a little bit of an edge on them. At the very least, they have the Phillies number. Atlanta was number 3 last week. They haven't lost this week. Mind you, we only have 4 games of schedule so far. 2-0 against Boston, 2-0 against the Mets so far. They haven't lost, so I can't really move them. They're holding the wins right now over Philly on the season. They haven't played each other too much. We got to see more of these guys because it's gonna be bloody. Number 2, I have the LA Dodgers. Started the week right. A team that was number 1 last week, 3-0 against the Marlins, but then we see them kind of stumble here against Padres 1-2, and for me that was enough for them to lose their number 1 spot, just not being able to walk away in their division yet. Padres, Giants, these guys still managed to give LA a run for their money, and it's just always been the case. And that left room for the number 1 Baltimore Orioles. I can't believe it. It's finally happened. The Orioles have become the number 1 team on the power rankings, and it's behind a 5-game week. Nothing too crazy. 1-1 against Washington, 2-1 against Arizona. But for me, they have the best record the Baltimore's had in, I forget how many years, but a long time, having this many wins at this point in the season. The last 2 times they did it, they won the World Series. They won the AL pennant. This is a team that is destined right now to make that kind of run, and we're seeing it in all aspects of this. There's a little bit of stumble with the bullpen over the past couple of weeks, but maybe they're shuffling some things around. I know they're going to make a trade. They're going to bring in some talent, so I'm not concerned about that. But Baltimore, I think well-deserved. It's been a grind for them from number 30. Was it 2-3 years ago? They were 30 for almost the entire season, but they have now made it to the top. Not a lot of teams have been there, so congratulations to Baltimore. So guys, let me know what you guys think. Where would you rank? I'm just completely out to lunch, etc., etc. Don't forget to subscribe, to like, and all that fun stuff. It really helps the channel grow. And if you want to keep talking, we do have a small community on the Discord. You can find the link for that down below. Thanks for watching, guys. Peace out.